Welcome, everybody, to the inaugural Data on Tap. We're Data Logic 360. We're super excited today to kick off a new podcast talking all things data. I think today's topic is going to be very relevant to what's happening in the marketplace overall. I think this is applicable to not only data professionals, but the entire market and overall talent that's out there. My name's Patrick Jacolenne, your host today. I have David and Ram with me. David, Ram, you want to give just a quick intro to yourselves before we talk a little bit about the podcast and today's topics?
Yeah, absolutely. David Hensley, I'm a data management professional, been working in the data management world around data governance, report certification for over 15 years with multiple Fortune 100 and 500 organizations. Since then, have joined Data Logic 360, working on our next venture. Rob?
Hey, yeah, hi everyone. Nice to be here. I come from a data management background as well. I have several years experience in the business intelligence arena, along with data governance and data quality. So I've worked as a customer with several different organizations, and I've also worked on the vendor side, selling data governance solutions to several Fortune 500 and other organizations as well. So I can see both sides of the coin, feel the pain on both sides, etc. But I'm thrilled to be here and to discuss my experiences from a vendor and a customer perspective.
Thanks, David. Thanks, Ram. So super excited to dive into today's topic, which is really about the state of the workforce in 2025. I think part of the reason why we actually decided to start this podcast is there was just a gap, something really missing out there as far as content's concerned for our audience. When you look across the static or one-dimensional content in LinkedIn, as well as even the podcasts that are out there, it's not reflective of the current state, at least not from a vulnerability standpoint. So I think we wanted to be the beat on the street, if you will, and really give a pulse around what's happening in the data world, including just the workforce and the dynamics that are changing. So I think what you're going to hear is us being somewhat vulnerable in what we talk about and discuss, kind of no holds barred, and not looking to sugarcoat anything either. And so this is great perspectives and insights that we have just on the overall market and what we're hearing from our clients as well as peer group across the network. As remote work, AI's impact on the gig economy as well as the way we work is changing fast. And we want to help kind of make sense of this all. And with David here, let's kind of get started and dive in and set the stage. When we talk about the state of the workforce today, what are some of the biggest trends you're seeing in 2025?
Yeah, great question, Patrick. I think we should probably, address the elephant in the room that most people are still thinking about, even though it's kind of changing based off of the pandemic and how things are improving, but it comes back to those seismic shifts that we've seen happening, and one primarily around remote and hybrid work. And that's become a bit of the norm for many industries as we went through the pandemic, but it was uncharted waters originally. And so data today shows about 30 to 40% of the US workers are working in hybrid setups currently, and companies are still trying to figure out how to balance the flexibility with collaboration. But what that also means is it's a bit of a tug of war now as some of these larger organizations start to look to return to office, the RTO. So they start looking at the workforce and thinking about, are we missing out on the value of in-person collaboration within the offices? Plus, they have these large footprints of real estate that they have sitting potentially idle. So what we're seeing is that a lot of the companies are mandating that return to office in some instances. Some are still working in a hybrid model where it's a percentage of time at home or out of the office and a percentage of time in the office, while some other organizations are really going back to their original kind of workforce approach, which is we want all of our staff back in the office. And that's a bit of a tug of war because employees love the flexibility. They've gotten used to have that ability to be at home, manage some of their personal life activities in parallel while working, towards their business objectives. And so 80% of workers or more want more of those remote options, while we're seeing some employers, especially in tech and finance, are pushing back the other way. And so the data's mixed, right? In-person work can boost innovation. We all know that, but I think we also learned through that pandemic and that hybrid model that we can be just as effective in many instances working remotely. As a matter of fact, A lot of the data from individual employees will tell you that they are more effective, right? They're reducing that transit time to work. They're not sitting in hours of traffic. They're able to actually just kind of go heads down before their workday starts and make a lot of progress. It's really interesting. My hope coming through that was that a lot of these organizations would see the value in that hybrid model and start, kind of move to that or retain that going forward, but not necessarily seeing that happen across the board. So what may happen is it may be this test and tune, right? We start to force people back to that return to office. Let's see how the employee morale is, and then see how that has an impact to retention as well. But I think that's one of the interesting points that I've kind of picked up on is I've seen some organizations that, in my belief, are using that return to office as a way to drive natural attrition, and try to reduce that workforce count that they had to expand over time. But it's interesting. I'd love to get your perspective, Ram or Patrick. What are you guys seeing?
I just have one quick question. So if you just think about remote, hybrid, and then return full time to office, where do you see us in this kind of transitionary state? Because we are in a bit of a transition. I know the pandemic seems like years ago, but we've come out of that with a bit of a jagged edge. It isn't a clean cut, and there's a long tail to that. So as far as this remote hybrid scenario playing out, are we in the beginning stages, like the middle or the end? Like if this is baseball and there's 9 innings, what inning do you think we're in? Because I think that's also everybody's kind of expectation, whether you're the CEO of the company or you're on the front lines, is that this was just going to be a clean cut and clean break, and everything was going to go back to normal, whatever normal is.
Yeah, the sense of normalcy. I would say if I'd use the baseball analogy, we're probably in the sixth or seventh inning, right? And there's some competition. The score is close between when we think about the employees and then the leaders of these organizations. And so I think that's when it really comes back to them starting to take a look and reach out to their employees and get a sense of, how happy are they with this approach. But it's going to be really by each organization. I mean, we're seeing certain companies. I think Google's one out there right now that's trying a little bit of a different type of hybrid approach where they're looking to set up some regional offices for some of those folks that really would be more productive or that collaboration on site would be helpful versus some of those positions like back office positions and things like that are more heads down. They really don't need to be into that work model where they're in the office on a regular basis. So it's an interesting concept. We're going to see how it plays out. But when you think about a lot of the big financial firms that are out there, the banks, within the finance tech industry, they are pushing more of that full return to office. Or if the hybrid model's there, it's 80% on site, 20% work from home.
Okay. So let's take another seismic shift. And Ron, this is kind of more for you. If David's saying we're in the sixth to seventh inning, which actually creates a big competitive landscape because there's a lot of talent in the free market now, and there's companies hungry for talent. But also, you have now this seismic shift with AI and automation. So companies that perhaps are experiencing reluctance with their workforce returning to the office are like, we're going to shift our investment strategy towards AI and automation. So we're going to make up for it with robots versus humans. And that sets a lot of fear factor into obviously these industries and the workforce as well. So what are you seeing perhaps on that front?
Yeah, just to make a point on the previous subject matter, I've been working from home for the last probably 13 years now. So I have not been to the office. I feel that sometimes the remote work it's a little bit more balanced approach from a work-life balance aspect of it. And also it gives me the ability to put in the time and effort as necessary. So then in the finance world, I know they're requesting the return to work. There's also a lot of things. I mean, just like healthcare, right? You cannot expect healthcare workers to be remote, et cetera. So finance world and a security perspective that comes in. Now we have the new world of AI that's taking everything by storm. Everybody wants AI right now. Right now, we have to implement it. We have to implement it. It seems to be a big race, but where is it headed? That's the thing. Some of the statistics say that 40% of employers are anticipating workforce reductions due to AI automation, and 67% are actively hiring for AI skilled roles. Now, it creates new opportunities. There's no doubt about it. Like, for example, in data science or ethics or and perhaps AI human collaboration. Now, for AI to be taking over somebody's job, it only takes over things that are repetitive tasks, right? It's example data entry or basic customer service. But at the same time, it's also increasing the demand for creative, strategic, and technical skills. So, AI is helping streamline workflows, etc. But from a worker perspective, you have to, Jensen Wang said this best, right? AI is not necessarily going to take your job, it's going to take jobs away from people who don't learn how to use AI. I mean, that's really, it's a skills gap when it comes down to that. So there's also a generational difference that's going to come into play between older workers who are not completely versed in the use of computer skills, or some of them are still struggling to use a smartphone which now has AI capabilities in it, etc. So I think AI literacy has become a must have, but it's not necessarily the game changer that most people are thinking that it's going to be. I mean, probably in the next couple of years, it is going to be in a position where if you don't know how to use AI, you're going to probably be struggling to find a job. But there's also the collaboration aspect of it, right? You have to learn, even for the simplest tasks. I mean, you can use it today to learn to increase your skills. What does it mean to work with AI? I mean, how do you ensure that a worker stays in the driver's seat than becoming an AI servant? Or a servant of AI, right? AI is not going to tell you what to do. You have to figure out how to best use AI to get to that next step. For example, in healthcare, they use AI for diagnostics. It enables doctors to spend more time on patient care, but at the same time, AI specialists are required to maintain these systems so that they get they provide better information to the doctors, and so it's just a matter of the thought process and changing it. But I don't think workers should let themselves get overwhelmed by the fact that AI is going to replace them. It's not.
That's a good point.
I don't
Yeah.
think they're at that point today, right? So
One question for you, Ram. So when you think about that, one thing I've noticed is we seem to see a lot of workers, and even outside of the
mhm,
tech industry, that are starting to pursue training around AI, right? Versus continued
yeah,
education in their specialized field. And I think it's that fear of missing out, right? Or trying to keep up with where that's going. But
mhm.
it always raises the question of what's the impact to those folks or those industries where AI is not a primary driver of their job today, but if they're going down that path, are we going to find ourselves with a lot of skilled AI workers, but non-skilled in some of the other areas of expertise that are needed?
Yeah, but you also have to look at it from this perspective. Are employers spending enough in helping reskill workers, right? Or are they just cherry picking young tech savvy talent? Should the government be involved in funding AI education? I don't know. I mean, Google, for example, has a career certification aspects for their employees. It includes AI focused tracks. And I think external workers can reach out or sign up for these courses and be able to understand how they work, or get certified as well. So but it's managing the worker sentiment, right? Is AI going to drive people into a fear filled, hey, you know what, I think I'm going to lose my job, and it's going to get to a negative aspect of it, because today workers are split, right? 50% see AI as a tool to enhance their work, while 40% fear job loss, or they feel like their um, job is going to become obsolete. But younger workers, I mean, especially the Gen Z, they're more optimistic about it, right? With more than 60% saying, oh, they want to use AI tools. We see kids doing that today, right? I mean, everywhere you go, there's parents just hand off their iPads and go, hey, work with this, and they're going at it, because the human interaction aspect of it gets lost. That's why there has to be a balance in that aspect of it. And if you want to, I mean, you could contrast perhaps a factory worker, that's worried about a robotic automation, but versus a designer who's using something AI to create a prototype, you know. So it's really finding that balance on how AI's impact is going to vary by the sector, and then figure out ways where employers can start upskilling their workers, giving them a way forward rather than instilling fear saying that, oh, your job's going to be, wiped out because of something. And that's not how it is going to happen. I think AI has been overhyped over the last few years, and there's a rush with no form of governance around it, right? Nobody's saying, hey, you know what, we need to manage this. I know Elon Musk keeps talking about it and says, hey, you know what, we need to put some regulations around this. We need to govern this better so that it doesn't completely destroy um, the way AI should be used, et cetera. So everybody's trying to find that balance in the environment today. I mean, I struggle with it sometimes myself. So
I
Let's
think
tie a quick. Sorry, Patrick. I was going to say, can we tie a quick data point to it? I was just reading last night. So, the World Economic Forum's Future of Jobs report for 2025, just for those listeners that are out there that are wondering about some of the statistics, it predicts that AI and other information processing technologies are going to transform 86% of the businesses. But what that results in, or the assumptions are, creating 170 million new roles and making 92 million existing jobs redundant by 2030. Now, of course, that's a forecast, right? So I wouldn't put all my eggs in that basket. The intended message is I don't think that there needs to be a panic as much about a big impact to the job force, but really taking a look at the job types that would be impacted.
Yeah. And I think that goes along with kind of how I was going to wrap this segment up is in the absence of really information and knowledge around a given topic, what starts to set in is a lot of fear, uncertainty, and skepticism. So I think it's advantageous for folks to really get out there and understand the benefits and value that AI can bring. And I'll just kind of bring this home. So I was working with a client the other day. They were a Microsoft shop. They have AI as far as Microsoft Copilot running in their Teams and Outlook environment. And what was really interesting is when I asked for them to pull up the data policy, they went to Copilot and typed in data policy, and it essentially crawled their entire SharePoint environment and pointed him directly to where the data policy resided. So, highly effective use case because I've sat there in scenarios where AI wasn't available, and it's like, where is your data policy? And it's like phone a friend asking five different individuals where the data policy is. And it's like, do you want version 0.5, version 1.1? Do you want the data policy for finance? Do you want the enterprise data policy? And so, really interesting to see how essentially it was acting as a co-pilot and filling in that void. I think that's where one of the benefits, main benefits that AI can bring to the front lines, which is really the business, is there's always been this chasm between technology, data, and the business. And you think about topics around knowledge graphs or customer data platforms or 360-degree views. And it's always been abstract to the business. They've heard it in the terms of kind of technical or data terms, but they've never seen it come to life. And I think AI can help with not only the navigation of getting to where you need, but it's also can become kind of a visual aid. You now have that interface, like a Google-esque interface to interact with through natural language processing to get to the answer or the document you need faster. And it should be, I think, to Ram's point, make you more effective in your job, make you more valuable in your job, especially if you're engaging with a managing director or the CEO and there's like, what's the forecast for the next, 3 months? And you're able in natural language processing to turn that answer around in a matter of seconds versus days because you need to wait on a Power BI dashboard to be refreshed.
I think it's important for folks who are listening to understand that there's a lot of AI courses don't be free that are available free, right? Coursera, Google, Microsoft, everybody's offering courses for free. Even LinkedIn has a set of courses. I think it's important to feel ready to work with AI rather than let it intimidate you, right? I mean, you have to allow for something to be able to assist you in your job function on a day-to-day basis.
Let's advance the conversation to kind of the gig economy. Even if we talk about all things considered, remote, hybrid, return to office, AI, automation, your brain is on overload 100% of the time, 24/7, 365. The level, I think, of expectation and the bar that has been set around just your general working knowledge around topics that never would have been a part of your vernacular, even in your sphere, like AI, are now at the forefront of everybody's minds. So how do people, start to begin to deal with burnout? And if you have a couple of chips to play, like where do you kind of place those bets? Because you can't cover off on all the bases. You just don't have the time and bandwidth to be able to do that. So, what are your thoughts as far as like burnout is concerned, and what are you seeing with kind of gig work that's giving people the flexibility and some of those benefits?
Yeah, that's a great
Well,
question. I mean, I still think it has a direct tie back, right? So when I think about burnout as well, to me, that also brings me back to that original topic of return to office. Because if you're able to have that flexibility, it can minimize that burnout between the balance of the personal life and the professional life, right? To some extent. But I think it goes much broader than that. I think what we're seeing is as we start to see, some of the impacts of what's happening in the industry today, a lot of the workforce is being asked to do two or three times the amount of work that they were doing previously with reduction in force, right? Or reduction in staff. So that's a big aspect of it. And then when we think about the unemployment rate today and some of the challenges that came with that, that creates another challenge. I don't know the statistics right off the top of my head, but I believe it's something around 0.2% of unemployment is existing today. And so there's something around 7.6 million jobs open, 7.1 million folks that are available to fulfill those jobs, but we're just not seeing that come through to fruition. And I think there's a lot of different factors that go into play to that. And I think one of those is as these folks start to feel that stress and that burnout and that pressure in these roles that they've been fulfilling for an extended period of time, they're starting to stop and take a look and ask the question of, what else can I be doing? What else is out there for me? And what other options would lead me to a little bit more, positive thought process about the job, but also being able to balance that work life balance overall? I don't know. What do you think, Ron?
there's a couple of things that kind of, for at least for a gig economy, that we're keeping tabs on today, right? Like 35% of the US workforce seems to be participating in gig work, right? I mean, in 2020, that seemed to be around the 27% mark. So, but there's also the challenge aspect of it, right? There's oversaturation in some of the platforms, especially around freelance work, right? Because it drives down the rates. And then there was some statistic that said that 25% of the gig workers were making below minimum wage after the expenses. So that is something that, it could be a possible career path or a stopgap, but I don't know how this will compare against a global remote talent pool that's available, right? The other aspect of it is, you know, it's more of a positive one where um, there are skilled workers that bring um, skills like 55% of freelancers that come with skills that not necessarily just soft skills, but the experiences that they gather in their specific industry. Say, for example, even in our industry as management professionals, we have been in a consulting role, or we have been in a professional role where we're providing services within an organization or in another way. Bringing that to the forefront, and it could be a form of career progression in a gig economy, right? I mean, being able to serve more than one customer, whether it could be a stepping stone, or to traditional roles as a staff augmentation aspect of it, or perhaps just being an entrepreneur, and especially building, when you come with the portfolio of capabilities, right? It complements the hybrid workforce on upskilling, etc. But challenge also comes with, a lot of the folks that are leaving the workforce today are being laid off. 40% of them feel like they have been stuck in dead end roles. And unlike hybrid settings where they could have possibly structured some training for themselves and been in a better position. But the gig economy does empower workers, but at the same time, it also traps some people in repetitive tasks or certain areas. But I'm just wondering if you guys have any thoughts around how gig workers can leverage skills for long-term success, right? I mean, that's something that anybody who's leaving the workforce today and coming into a different economy, especially having to learn to use AI, et cetera. How do they set themselves up for success as the next step? That type of, what are the strategies they could possibly employ? I mean, it'd be great to get some thoughts out there so folks can understand that.
It's a great question. Interestingly enough, this past weekend, when you think about gig work and what's happening in the economy today, I've even seen data professionals. Now, not at the C-suite level, but I Ubered the other day and I had a gentleman that used to be an IT project manager, right? Since he was impacted by something that happened in his workforce, laid off, whatever may have happened, he's now used that as a stopgap. But he's also found that he likes the flexibility of it, and it's been financially supportive enough for him to continue down that path for a period of time. But, I kind of asked the question, will you return to your full-time day job? And he's absolutely at some point when the right opportunity comes along. So I think these people are using these opportunities to fill the gap until they find an exciting offer that really is going to take them to the next level within their career. So it's an interesting approach.
And I would say if we just kind of bring it home a bit around this and expand it beyond just gig economy, if we put ourselves in much of the mindset of a data professional, if you're in an existing role in corporate America, you're sitting there with a high degree of uncertainty, maybe more uncertainty than you've ever had in your career. It could be just simply around how do I upskill or reskill to stay competitive and relevant, and ensure that I'm exceeding expectations and just not meeting expectations with my current employer. What transferable skills do I have? Am I going to be part of the next round of layoffs? Or you have those folks that have been out there beating the drum and applying for hundreds of jobs over the past 6 to 12 months with really not much light at the end of the tunnel. And again, a higher degree of certainty. And then you have other individuals, whether they're still in corporate America or have made a transition out, they're like, do I want to go back into corporate America? Which I think speaks a little bit to the gig economy as a bridge, but also do I want to become now this kind of solopreneur? Do I want to take my experience and background and package that up as an offering back to my network and perhaps companies that I've served for? That all comes with a lot of questioning and uncertainty in and of itself, whether you're in gig or you are looking to launch and start your own company. And I think one of the things that is really kind of the testament to the future of work is collaboration, because it's not like you can go out to the internet or a bookstore and pick up a blueprint that's going to take you from A to B to C to D. There's a lot of trial and error and lessons learned along the way. I think one of the things that we wanted to introduce as a part of this initial podcast around the collaboration and future of work was the Data Thrive Network, and really offering a place for individuals, regardless of where you are kind of in this process, whether you're still in corporate America trying to size up what's next, or you are transitioning out of corporate America and you're uncertain about where you're heading. Data Thrive is really to connect individuals across the network and help provide some guidance and give you the answers from people that have really been there, done that, which the three of us all have. Ron, you talked about 13 years I haven't gone into office. Well, those are some good lessons learned experiences that you can give to not only just individuals, but even corporations that are considering what are the pros and cons around that. And so, I think that one of the things we can talk about maybe in a later podcast is kind of the Data Thrive Network and how that can really provide a benefit and value to our audience. Because I think we're hoping that it really redefines success. It's not ultimately about kind of corporate wins or profitability, but it empowers really individuals and helps individuals flourish in a community. And so maybe David or Ron, you can talk a little bit briefly about Data Thrive, and then that sets the stage for the next podcast and kind of just transition from there.
Yeah, I love that. So I'd like to add a couple of points, and then Ram, maybe if you want to talk on Data Thrive a little bit, I think you hit the nail on the head, Patrick, right? Because when you think about these folks that are in one of those two positions, either they're impacted or they're thinking about what's next for me. They're limited on options today. There are many different platforms to go out there and apply for positions. As you said, beat the pavement, put in 400 applications. That's great. You're hoping you're going to create some, conversations that way and some potential opportunities. And then what most people tend to leverage is like a LinkedIn to leverage their network, which is also a great tool for that networking. But outside of that, what do you do? How do you start connecting with those individuals and then building that network where you're able to communicate and stay in touch on a regular basis, recommend each other for roles, leverage each other's areas of expertise? So that's where I think Data Thrive can play, a pivotal role.
Yeah. The, you know, stepping back into the gig economy helps, that as it could be used as one of the reasonings for the Data Thrive network, right? Because in a way, it normalizes non-traditional work, right? I mean, today, like 45% of the workers, they view the gig jobs as a legitimate career choice because what happens is it allows you to foster a portfolio career mindset. So basically, you're building a portfolio of expertise because of what you're delivering to specific customers, and plus it aligns with the remote work aspect of it, right? It gives you the autonomy to be able to work, away from the challenges of the 9 to 5 model. So basically, it redefines success in the workforce. So from a Data Thrive perspective, what we're trying to do is instead of having gig workers having to go and find their own gigs, we're trying to form a network where we can, the data professionals can come to get together and thrive together. Right now, the change it allows for the collaboration, not competition, because that's where the future is headed, especially given the introduction of AI and the need for AI, et cetera. So, we want to model the Data Thrive network around, the aspect of being able to have the time for your family, but at the same time being able to thrive economically with the ability to get out there as a community to drive success by delivering specific, project related work or learning something new or working with different customers. You learn different challenges. You learn different ways to deal with things. Change management, communication, everything becomes so important given the fact that you're interacting with different people at different times. And everybody has a different personality. How do you all work together? Right? This network is about flourishing together, and that's where we want to take it. And we want to come together and bring like-minded folks who want to work with us and make this, um, a successful venture. And that's our goal with the Data Thrive network. And Patrick, if you want to add anything to that, it'd be good for folks to
No,
understand that.
I think the additional context both of you provided is helpful. Also, I'm sitting there perhaps in their shoes thinking gig economies, perhaps hypothetically work for Bank of America, unfortunately, as part of a workforce reduction. Now I'm thinking about doing DoorDash and Uber Eats. I don't think that's what any of us are necessarily talking about. We're saying very tangential to the gig economy. There's also a lot of fractional work. So there's companies that have very project specific, time based deliverable work where subject matter expertise relevancy in those industries is highly sought after today. We see this across the board. And so I think there's opportunities, regardless of what level you're at, even fractional CDO, as an example, or analytics officer, you're coming in to help shape or redefine what the organization could look like, could be an opportunity. And it's more of kind of that gig centric, I would say, type of model. But that's where the network comes in to help provide you with those guardrails, the right structure, and also that peer group of individuals who have that experience and can share that with you. So, I appreciate that context because I think people can perhaps have a negative effect on gig. And I know a lot of folks out there actually, the traditional sense of gig could be a really quick bridge. You hop in your car and you start to do Uber or Lyft driving as an example to just make ends meet.
Yep.
And I think the Thrive Network is a build upon network of that where you can stay engaged with like-minded business professionals, et cetera.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
the biggest positive feedback I've heard from some of the folks that are engaged with Data Thrive right now is exactly how it's positioned is turning that network into a revenue stream, right? And there's multiple options to do that with Data Thrive, which I know we'll probably dig into in our next episode. But those options are out there. And I think, again, that's where it's something new and unique that expands upon the traditional process of trying to find these roles within these organizations, one, and leveraging these standardized platforms where you are collaborating with folks like LinkedIn. Again, great aspect, but how do you take that and expand it and turn it into the revenue? And I think that's what Data Thrive supports.
Yeah. So I think ultimately to close today's session, the call to action for anyone out there, if you're uncertain or there's fear in where you are currently, raise your hand, ask for help, connect with the three of us, connect with your network, start offering up your information and knowledge on LinkedIn as a source of value to others. And you'll find that you'll not only get that in return, they may tap you on the shoulder to learn more. So lean into your network and leverage that. We often find that that's probably the first step, but also the place where people miss the mark continuously is just leveraging and engaging with their network. And it's not until you need your network do you really realize perhaps how much you've missed in not kind of feeding that network as well.
I agree holistically.
Remote
Dave.
work in action.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
Thanks, guys, for today's session. Really great insights. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having us. Appreciate the
Thank you.
gentlemen.
All right. Take care, guys.
Bye bye.